Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's first webinar in a series of 5, where we are going to talk about SAP Product Costing and how transparency can help you in improving decision making. First of all, some practical guidelines. You will be able to ask questions, which can be done in the chat box. Those are monitored. For optimal performance and experience, we recommend you to use Google Chrome. And this webinar will be recorded and will be distributed later on. For now, we would say, please hang on, relax and enjoy the session. As said, there are 5 webinars. The first one is SAP Product Costing, followed by production shop floor extensions. On the 24th of October, we have ESG reporting, all-in-one S/4HANA integrated business planning, and then SAP phase-based plant maintenance. Who am I? My name is Steven Malisse. I'm working now since 2 years for Flexo as a SAP finance and controlling expert. And I'm working all of my career actually with SAP. In the beginning, I was mostly working with finance, but then I got really intrigued by management accounting because I was really curious to understand how cost prices were determined, how cost prices were set, and what the analysis was for this, and how this was integrated into SAP. My first employer was actually a big employer here in Belgium with a big manufacturing line. And so when we went to the canteen, for example, at noon, we always went through the factory. I saw all of these big machines, and I wanted to understand how is this integrated into SAP? How can we see this in SAP? How can we follow up these cost prices? How can we do the setup actually in SAP to have a full transparency, to understand what is my cost price and what is my profit. So in this way, I gradually moved from finance to controlling, and where I noticed that actually during my career with all the companies where I got involved to, that many of the manufacturing companies are actually not using SAP on its full capabilities, especially for what concerns product cost controlling. Many were only using product cost planning. So that means that they were creating standard cost estimates. For example, they were estimated how much will this product cost to produce, but no actual costing was done in SAP itself. Actual costing was mostly done then outside SAP in complex Excel files, which are time consuming and which require, of course, a lot of manual work. This means that there is no time left anymore, or not many time anymore left for analysis. And analysis is the base to make, of course, a good decision in your company. The reason why these companies did not implement or use actual costing, and many other companies are still waiting to implement actual costing, is because they fear it's too much effort and it would require too much discipline to implement actual costing. Also, it seems for many companies that this is really difficult to understand, to implement, and too complicated. Also, to increase the month-end tasks. But actually, actual costing is helping you here in SAP. SAP is enabling you to decrease the manual efforts. It's not a complex task to perform at month-end. It's not time-consuming. On the contrary, it allows you to gain some time for analysis. And this is what we are going to talk about. Because knowing your correct cost price is essential. You want to value your inventory at your correct actual prices. Do we undervaluate or do we overrate? But also you want to know your actual profitability. You want to understand where your weaknesses are and where your challenges are. If you're not doing actual costing, whether it's now either inside or outside SAP, you would have inaccurate cost calculations. Difficulties in performance analysis. For example, are we buying at the correct expected costs? Inventory valuation issues. Do we over or undervaluate our stock? Challenges in price determination. Is our sales price too high or is our margin too low? The reduced and incorrect profitability. Is our margin really what we think it is? Because with that information that we have, if our cost information is not correct, if our margin information is not correct, do we take as a company the correct decisions in terms of investments, in terms of should we really produce this product or not? So these are decision-making challenges. And this is where SAP can help you. Take the full control of your costing insights, where we will plan our costs in SAP, where we will capture our costs, we will perform our month-end tasks, we will have the actual costing tool where it will help us in order to gain time to analyze and to make the correct decisions possible. In order to illustrate, we assume we are a manufacturing company during this webinar, where we are a bike factory, bicycle factory. We assemble bikes. Of course, our management, they wanted to bring a new bike on the market with a sales price of 1,000 euro. And we want to know, is this sales price, is this correct? Will we have a good margin? We want to know what is our actual cost, or we want to estimate our costs to analyze and also possible differences when we do productions. Our first step is to plan and estimate our cost price. Now, what is a cost price? An estimated price, what do we use it for? We use this for inventory valuation and for controlling. A standard price, like we know the terminology, is used from a legal purpose. Assume the bike that we want to produce, that we want to sell at 1,000, assume our standard price is 900 euro, then it will be evaluated in our inventory at 900 euro. From a controlling perspective, this 900 euro will be break down into the several components. The standard price, the standard cost will be break down. For example, 800 euro are components. We have different components for our bike. We have wheels, we have aluminium frame, etc., etc. But we have also direct overheads. Because we assemble the bike, we have direct overhead costs and also indirect overheads that we want to allocate. For example, we have sales overheads, we have indirect administration overheads, etc. All these costs are shown in the breakdown of the cost estimate, which in the end forms the 900 euro. Why should we do product cost planning? Like I said, at one side, we use this for inventory valuation, for a legal perspective. But also, it's our benchmark. Because we want to evaluate, are we producing at the correct price? Meaning, if we have many variances, are our costs too high? Or, for example, also our components, do we buy them at a too high price so we can evaluate our buyers? It supports us also in make or buy decisions. For example, if we have this bike of 1,000 euro that we want to sell and we can produce it at 900 euro, should we evaluate either to maybe buy an already assembled bike with another cheaper vendor and then rebrand? This information from the standard cost is also used in other SAP components, such as SD for price setting, but also in controlling for profitability analysis. Now, how do we do this product cost planning? Without going too much into detail, we can, of course, use the most famous one, or where we use SAP in its full capabilities, where we let the system calculate the cost price based on the information that is already present. In our company, our manufacturing process is already fully available in SAP, meaning the BOM, the bill of material, the routing, is already present as a master data for our products. So the system will take that information to calculate, to pick up the components and to calculate the final cost. For materials which we buy externally, like raw materials, etc., we can also choose to either lower the price, for example, but also there, SAP can help you by picking up, for example, the last price from logistics. What was my last purchase order price, for example? Possibilities are huge there with SAP to support you to determine a standard price. And of course, also moving average prices can be used. As said before, we're using the production planning master data, the bill of material, the routing, which contains the production steps, but also we can allocate indirect overheads. We can instruct the system to calculate either in a simple way or in a complex way to calculate overheads. When we look now, for example, to the bill of material of our bicycle, we see in our bicycle we have a frame set, we have a wheel set, we have a group set, and we have some connection tools. On the bill of material, we can see the number of pieces that is normally required, while in the routing, we can see all the production steps which are necessary and which activities are assigned to that. First of all, we see in our manufacturing, for the assembly of our bike, we only have one step, which is the assembly step, and to which we assign 3 types of costs. Setup time, we assign machine time, and of course labor time. There we assign the different timing which is needed to do the assembly. Once we have the system instructed to calculate the material cost estimate, to calculate the standard price, we arrive at our screen in SAP, where it gives us the overview of what components have been included, what activity types have been included, and what overheads have been calculated. We can see this on the left side, and on the left side we will see an estimated total cost, the individual costs and the total cost. The total cost is also shown at the right side of our screen, where we can actually see what will be the calculated inventory value, what will be the cost of goods sold value, and what will be the cost of goods manufactured value. This can be different, this can be the same value. The most important or the most interesting part is at the right bottom side of the material cost estimate, because there we can actually see the different cost components. As said before, we do a breakdown of our standard price, which is in our case here 892 euro, but we want to understand how is this now built. We know we have different components, but if we look, then we see that direct material is existing out of almost 800 euro. So that means 800 euro of almost 900 euro is existing out of direct materials. That purchase price of our direct materials is in our case very important. If we would buy at a much higher price, that gives us already a deduction of our profit, because the direct and indirect overheads are in this case limited. And this information is taken up to the cost component split, which we will also see in our profitability analysis, or better known in our margin analysis. In our margin analysis, we can see, of course, what are our sales, but then we want to understand how is our margin, how is it built. We see the material costs, the production costs, the overhead costs, in order to arrive to our cost of goods manufactured, our gross margin. Deducting the sales costs, we will arrive at our cost of goods sold in order to arrive at our net margin. And in this way, we can understand how our margin is established. If certain costs would suddenly increase or decrease, then we can react to that. And we can further work and make decisions on that as a company. In the first step, we planned our costs. Now we will capture actually our actuals. For our bike, we will capture the costs on our production orders. We will start assembling bikes and capturing all those costs. This means that we now can understand if we have variances on our production order, how many variances we have, and what kind of variances we have. And this gives us really insights on our production performance. Do we match or do we exceed the cost that we expected? The result from each production order will be settled and will be used further in determining our inventory values, which is then used in our actual costing process. So what do we see on a production order? Assume that we are planning to produce 10 bikes on one production order. But in the end, we only we confirm 9 final assembled bikes. Then the system will show us the cost for 10 bikes which have been planned. But the consumption and the confirmations will be done for 9 bikes. So that will be our target costs. And the system will show us now a difference between actual costs and target costs, actual costs and planned costs. And this is where it gets interesting. Because in this way, you can really analyze what are my differences and again, a make or buy support decision. In the example of our bike that we're going to produce, here we can see a production order for one bike, where SAP has calculated the differences for our production order. The variances are, for example, quantity variances, because we consumed, instead of 10 connection tools, we consumed 15. And so this variances is taken through. On the other side, the labor time was less than foreseen as what was stated in the routing. And so in the end, we have a total variance on this production order, which will be taken onto the actual costing calculation further in the process. So what do we see in the end as a conclusion on a production order? We can see the consumption of our components, like our frame of our bike, our wheel set, a group set, connection tools. We have our direct overheads, which can be confirmed, which are our labor time, setup time, and machine time. And then finally, we let the system calculate the indirect overheads based on our components and our direct overheads. And these can be, for example, sales and administration overheads. When we arrive at month end, when we went through the process all month, when we created production orders and we produced, of course, some month-end tasks need to be completed. Next to the finance ones, we have also the controlling tasks that needs to be completed. And this is the third step. These tasks are really crucial in our process in order to be able to know and analyze the actual costs of our bike. The activities that we do in order to correct our balance sheet and our P&L to come to as close as possible to the reality are, for example, assume that the labor cost is actually higher or lower than what we foresaw. Then we do a reevaluation at actual prices. Assume €8 per hour becomes 10 euro per hour, then we can reevaluate at the actual price. Or, for example, we created one huge production order of 100 bicycles. We consumed almost every component, but we did not receive already all bikes. Then that would mean a P&L impact, but that would mean that the final bikes are not yet into our stock. So we would have the P&L impact, which we actually want to shift to our balance sheet. And that is the process in WIP calculation, where we want to move from unneeded P&L to balance sheet. We calculate, of course, the overheads, as said before, based on our components which have been consumed, and our direct overheads. And we let the system calculate the different variances. It's not only the total variance that is being calculated, but also the system can identify, based on our customizing, which kind of variances we have. Is it due to input variance, or is it scrap variance? Is quantity variance? Any variance that we define, and it will be identified. Finally, we settle, and the total difference will be settled and will be taken to the material, which we use then in our actual cost calculation. The actual cost calculation, which is then the last step in our process of activities that we need to do, is where we execute the actual costing steps. Now, before we say actual costing, when doing actual costing, we actually need material ledger. It is mandatory to have this in our system, which is actually also mandatory, or which is actually already activated in S4. And it allows us not only to perform actual costing, but also to value our inventory in multiple currencies. As said in the beginning of the presentation, companies have been tentative to implement and use material ledger because they feel it's too much discipline. It would increase the month-end tasks, and it would be too complicated to understand. Actually, in the beginning, material ledger was only implemented by a specific number of organizations. But looking into actual costing with material ledger, the actual gains for a company with actual costing is that SAP does all the calculation work for you. As said in the beginning, we have our standard cost estimate, where we can use our data from production planning in order to calculate our standard price. We use our production orders from our bikes to capture all our costs and to capture variances. These variances are then taken through our actual cost calculation. This means we can value our inventory at the actual cost. If our bicycle, for example, standard price 900 euro, but in the end it would be that, assume we only produced one bike and the actual cost would be 950, then it means that our inventory value should be 950 and not the 900, which is more a realistic view. Apart from that, if we are intercompany-wise transactions, we can easily identify and set up transfer pricing between different plants. Assume that we are part of an American group, then we can also value our stock at another currency, for example, US dollar. But then finally, we also know our true cost of sales, and we know our true profitability. Taking again the example of we want to sell our bike for 1,000 euro, taking again the example of we produced the bike at 950 while the actual standard price was 900, then our margin is not 100 as we expected, but is only 50. And this can be very important for management for taking decisions. Should we really produce this bike or continue producing this bike or not? The true cost of our bike, we can also see where are these variances coming from. We want to understand where is this 950 coming from. Is it because we have purchased at a too high price? Then it means that we really have to focus on our purchasers. Do we need to further evaluate them? Do we need to follow up strictly purchase price variances? We have a lot of information available in SAP. SAP is doing all the calculation work for you, and it's giving you the time to perform the analysis. So what is now the actual costing process? Like we said in the beginning, we calculate our costing estimate. We do manufacturing, meaning we capture all our costs. But then the system, we let it calculate an actual cost price, also known as the periodic unit price. This means a moving average is actually being calculated. Assume we produce 100 bikes, then the moving average for these bikes will be calculated. So if we have a bike produced at 950 and the other one is produced at an actual cost of 900, two bikes, then the moving average will be here 925, at which it will be evaluated. Before we can do actual costing, we need to before we can calculate our PUP, actions need to be done. Is of course all our goods movements need to be completed for the period. We need to make sure that all our variances are reflected. And by this, I mean not only the production order variances, but I also mean the purchase price variances from your purchase invoices. We need to calculate our actual activity prices, and that would allow us to calculate the PUP. There is, of course, seeing this discipline that you need to follow up, but it is not the complicated discipline or the discipline that would take too much time and effort that many companies would expect with actual costing. The key message is here that we want to know the actual cost of our bike so that we can reevaluate our inventory at the real cost, at the real price for our bike, taking all the variances into consideration of production and purchase price variances for the underlying materials. I said again, we have, for example, a wheel set or a frame set that we bought. The standard price for the wheel set was, for example, 150 euro. But if, for example, at a certain moment we can only buy it at 200 euro, then this has a huge impact, of course, on our standard price and our actual cost price. By this, we also want to add that actual costing is, of course, based on our actual BOM during the production order process. So it's not because theoretically we had one wheel set, one framework, and one group set with 10 connection tools that were being used, that this is what we will also see in the actual costing calculation. We will see, of course, if 15 have been used, that these 15 will be used, or if even a material was used, consumed, that is not on the BOM, then we will see this also in the actual costing calculation. And this is really the strength of actual costing, because it will take the actual costs. In order to calculate the actual cost for our bike, it will take the cost from the underlying materials as well with their variances. And for that, I would like to show you this again with our bike that we have produced, for which we have some variances. In SAP, we have a very nice report, which is the material price analysis, which allows you to deep dive into all movements for a specific material. Of course, we cannot do this for all materials, but we have reports in SAP to pick your top 10, top 15 with the highest variances. And here you can do deep dive to understand how your actual cost was calculated from. We see the result before the calculation, before the end of the month, where we see the variances. It's still evaluated at standard price, but we can see already a calculated moving average. And for example, for our frame component, which we can see on the left side of our screen, we can see a large difference because we purchased 10 pieces at a much higher price than the standard price. We see on the right side, we see our bike, our final product, where we also have already a variance coming from our production order. Once we then have executed the actual costing run, the variances are taken into consideration. That means that the variance from the frame which we have bought at a much higher price will be taken into consideration to calculate the final actual cost price of our bike that we have assembled. And this is the real strength, because SAP is doing all those calculations for you instead of you maybe doing this in Excel and losing too much time, which is crucial that you can use for analysis. So our assembled bike does not only take the variance from its own production order, but takes the variances from the underlying components, like, for example, the framework, but also from the activities which also have been reevaluated, where we can see, for example, that the actual cost of our activity was decreased or increased. Now, taking back all our difficulties where we had an inaccurate cost, thanks to actual costing, now we can perform an accurate cost calculation for our bike. We have difficulties in performance analysis. Now we can do continuous improvements, for example, on our purchasing processes. For our framework, which we bought at too high price, do we need to further focus on that? Our production process, why did we consume 15 instead of 10? Is it bad quality? The stock is also now corrected at its correct value. So that means from an audit perspective, we can value our stock at the real cost. The reduced and incorrect profitability, we have a correct profitability, a correct transparency. And this means this supports us to make correct decisions for the future. Of course, apart from the standard available tools in SAP to make your variance and scenario analysis, we at Flexo have also developed a specific tool for which my colleague Koen will give you some more information.
Thank you, Steven. So my name is Koen van der Wegen. I'm Planning Analytics Solution Architect at Flexo, and I will give you a little bit more insights in the extra capabilities that we are offering on top of the SAP Product Costing and actual costing modules into SAP with the help of SAP Analytics Cloud. So both on the analytics and planning side, we're actually offering extra capabilities. Like Steven was already explaining, the starting point of the whole product costing cycle is to build up these cost estimates. And this is typically by organizations done once a year. But of course, over the last years, with COVID, energy crisis, and so on, organizations have learned that it's not sufficient to just build up your product costs once a year, but that you need to be able to do planning at any moment in time. And SAP Analytics Cloud is offering best practices for financial planning, which is great. But the piece on product cost planning was fairly light. And for this, actually, we have built an extension, which is our Flexo Product Cost Simulator, which will be soon available in the SAP store. Now, before taking you into the details of a demo, I will quickly explain you what the solution is offering and also what we will show into the demo. So at the center, you can see the standard cost of your product. And the solution will actually offer you in a very flexible way to simulate on raw material prices, but also on activity rates like energy prices, depreciation rates. And thirdly, it will also allow you to simulate on quantity structure very easily. These things are also possible in SAP, but not in the flexible way that we are offering within this planning solution. And of course, having then a resimulated or a recalculated standard cost of your product for your full product portfolio is not the end point of your analysis. You also want to recalculate your total cost of goods sold based on your planned sales quantities. Now, I will take you into the demo, and the demo is based on an actual implementation we have done at a big pharmaceutical company who are using this product cost simulator. And here you can see we're at the starting screen. So let's say practically At the starting screen, you have all the options. In this case, we're going to copy one of the budget versions in which we already have included the cost estimates. So we already integrated cost estimates from SAP, and we're actually going to create a simulation version. And with this simulation version, as explained on previous slide, we're going to make a mass change to the quantity structure. So for example, they have understood from their production organization that they can produce more efficiently, so they need to use less of their key raw material. So in this case, it's glucose. They will, let's say, use 2% less of this product. Secondly, they also learned that this important raw material is also increasing in price due to discussions with our supplier. And here they have the ability to quickly simulate on the raw material price. And this will, of course, impact the full recalculation of standard cost. And as a third simulation action, they will actually simulate on the increased energy price for a specific cost center for a specific plant. So in this case, also the energy price will increase. Now, taking these three assumptions into consideration, what we now want to do is we actually want to recalculate for, let's say, all our products, so the full product portfolio, we want to recalculate a new standard, or let's say a new simulated standard price. And the advantage here is that you can very quickly do these simulations, as you see, and as well go into analysis and understanding between the standard which was available in SAP and the one that you have now simulated. You can very visually see which are the components which are actually making the change, and also the percentage impact they make on the change. This is very useful for individual products, but of course, as I explained in the beginning, also the analysis of your total cost of goods sold, where we comparing a base which you used into your budget versus a new simulated reference is quite interesting, because you can analyze on your efficiency, meaning using less of your quantity structure, but you can also analyze in terms of changes in raw material or activity prices. So this was just a sneak preview. Okay. Now, as a conclusion of, let's say, our solution, it's making use of standard SAP Analytics Cloud capabilities with the direct S/4HANA integration. As you have seen, it has very flexible driver-based simulation, raw material, activity price, quantity structure simulations. All the calculations are happening quite performant, and you don't need to bring the data of these simulations, of these versions, to a separate reporting environment. You can directly analyze with our offered variance reports these deltas. So it's quite complementary to the product cost and actual cost engine, which is available in SAP. But for the final conclusion, I pass the word to Steven.
Thank you, Koen. So what is now the conclusion of today, where SAP can help you? First of all, it's a crucial helping tool for cost controlling, because it gives you insights on your efficiencies, on your real profitability, and how you can then improve those. And this is really needed in today's business environment to stay competitive. Again, because we gain the time where we let SAP do all the work for us, we can focus on the analysis to have this insights on our efficiencies and profitability. And also, additionally, we have also enabled the possibility to perform an advanced scenario and variance planning with our own Flexo SAP Product Costing simulator. Are there any questions? Is it possible to easily reverse or correct possible mistakes in the actual costing process? Well, actually, yes. We can reverse, or actually explain it in a different way. When we are performing the actual costing process, we can do this several times until the moment we do the final posting, the last step, which would be then in accounting, where we reevaluate our stock and our cost of goods sold. But even then, if for some reason a mistake would be discovered and that certain movements or variances would not be included, we can then reverse for that month. We can reverse the postings and redo the calculation. Of course, once the month has passed and we're in the next month's closure, then then we cannot correct anymore, of course. But during our closing, we can fully reverse, fully correct our possible mistakes, or let's say items which were not included. Please note though, you cannot manually intervene. You cannot manually change, of course, because the system is taking everything from our material ledger, meaning from our material movements and from our data, such as from invoices which were registered. Thank you. The next question is, how much time does it take to complete the actual costing process at month end? Well, this depends, of course, from organization to organization and how you want to tackle this. You can choose to do this plant by plant, to create a costing run plant by plant, or you can even create one costing run for all your plants together. But even then, in both cases, the actual costing process, the cockpit in SAP, which is supporting you, is a matter of a couple of clicks, and then depending on the data, it will take either a few minutes to complete each step. If it's huge data, it will take some more time, which you can then run in the background. But even then, we're not talking about hours and hours and days. So the actual costing calculation is really a quick and fast tool, even also compared to what we had already in ECC, because there it was already existing. But now since S4HANA, also there, our engine, our calculation engine has much improved. Another question is, can we also evaluate our stock at FIFO? Yes, we can do that. We can use the actual costing run to evaluate our stock at the FIFO value or the LIFO value or the lowest value determination, because that's even, let's say, the advanced version or the advanced usage of actual costing. So to where the PUP would not calculate a moving average or where would calculate then a FIFO. We have even the possibilities in SAP with the actual costing run to run an alternative valuation run, to run a PUP over several months, or to run next to our moving average, what we calculate in the PUP, to run and also a FIFO. Thank you. So by that, I want to thank you. We conclude here for today's webinar. I would like to thank you for your attendance, and we hope to see you back in one of the next webinars. Upcoming on the 10th of October, production shop floor, 24th ESG, the 14th of November, we have SAP for HANA and integrated business planning, and the last one in December, SAP phase-based plant maintenance. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.